One thing that people don't realize about reflexology is that it's not always about helping the physical body. It actually is holistic. And one branch of health that reflexology is quite beneficial for is mental health. So this is something that's becoming quite epidemic for many people in our population. There's a lot of depression and anxiety, and I wanted to show you guys a protocol using the reflexes that can help with symptoms of depression and anxiety. So to start with, every time I have a reflexology client who is trying to focus on these, we do take a note of the symptoms that they experience so that we can tell if what we're doing is having an effect down the line with multiple sessions. And when symptoms change, we know that what we're doing is having an effect. So reflexology does have a good track record for this, for helping alleviate the symptoms. And I'm going to show you some of the reflexes that we're going to approach. First of all, I always start with the brain reflex. And anyone who practices reflexology already will know that the brain reflex is the top of all of the toes. And it's not just pressing down from the top. You can really work quite detailed in the top of each of the toes, just like the brain itself is in the head. Okay, so if you can imagine the two toes together as the main reflex, we're going to work all the way around for the brain reflex, and we'll do that in each of the smaller toes as well as extensions. So each top of the toe all the way through, we're going to work along the brain reflex, and you can spend significant amount of time with that, because the brain, if it's going through changes at all, then it can disrupt neurotransmitters. Those are responsible for pain. They're also responsible for mood. Okay, so they can also be linked with depression symptoms. So we'll work the brain. We'll do that on both feet, especially the large toe. Then if we move on to the spinal cord, we want to make sure we're getting the entire central nervous system, spinal cord and brain included. And that just helps us with a nervous system reset. Okay, so that's the intention. So these are all the reflexes for brain and then spinal cord down the inside of both feet. We'll work those first. Next, we're going to move on to 3 reflexes that are in the big toe, and they represent 3 glands that are in the head, or 3 areas of the brain. The first one is pituitary. That's in the center of the big toe. So the pituitary reflex, if we press on that, and you can even do both toes at the same time, but the center of the pad, and you press into that, you can hold it for a good 30 seconds. You can go back to it as many times as you want. But that's the master reflex for the hormone system, for the endocrine system. And so it does influence all of the other hormone producing glands as the master gland, and it's also a pain reliever hormone. We also have the pineal gland, which is on the outside or the lateral part of the big toe. It's often where people have a hangnail or an ingrown toenail, I meant to say. And so this is the pineal gland reflex on the big toe. And what's interesting about the pineal gland in the body is that it actually produces melatonin. So anybody who's got disruption in sleep patterns that can also lead to increased depression symptoms, then the pineal gland is a really good one to work on. But interestingly, it also has to do with circadian rhythms, which is light and dark cycles. And so if anyone has winter depression or seasonal affective disorder, then you definitely want to work these areas with extra attention. Also really good for people who do shift work, who might be disrupting their natural rhythm of light and dark. Like, you know, your body's sleepy when it's dark and wakes up when it's light. Okay, so that's for melatonin, for helping with sleep, and also for circadian rhythms. And then we have the hypothalamus. That is also on the outside part of the big toe. So for reflexology therapists, this is our zone 5 of the big toe. And it's at the base of the pad in zone 5. And the hypothalamus is a part of the brain that tracks your homeostasis. It's always monitoring, but it works with the other hormones as well in the hormone system. And so there's something called the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis, the HPA axis. And that axis, which brings us to our 4th reflex that we're going to work, which is the adrenal gland reflex, from pituitary, hypothalamus, and then adrenals, which is between the big toe and the second toe if you kind of drop down from the webbing and just underneath the ball of the foot. This would be the adrenal reflex. Here it is in this foot, here it is in this foot. The adrenal reflex is very important to work because that axis together, the HPA axis, if that is dysregulated in any way, and especially the cortisol function of the adrenals, people with high cortisol levels or an overactive stress response, that's what regulates the stress response. And studies show that people that have that dysregulated and have an overproduction of cortisol also have a high incidence of depression. So we can work these ones with people who do have symptoms. We can also work them preventatively to make sure that this axis and the stress response is actually functioning as it should, right? High stress when you need to deal with something that's survival, and then low stress when you aren't. So we should be able to bring that back down again into sympathetic nervous system functioning, or rest and repair, relaxation. So the final one that I'll show you is actually the solar plexus. That is specifically for rest and repair. It is the opposite of the stress response. It's the parasympathetic nervous system, and a broad thumb pad comfortably tucked underneath the pad of the foot at the top of the arch. This one, when you're pressing into solar plexus, you can ask your client to take a nice deep breath. So if you can take a nice deep breath, watch the abdomen when it rises with your pressure in, and as the abdomen falls, you can release your pressure. And you can kind of hang out here. You can even do that 4 or 5 times and really key into that parasympathetic resting response for the body, taking it out of that high functioning HPA axis where too much cortisol is causing symptoms of depression. So that would be my protocol, along with the global application of all the reflexes. You could do some all over squeezes just to say hi to all the reflexes in the body, or to help with circulation, which of course is what transports hormones. But that would be my number one protocol, would be brain, spinal cord, pineal gland or pineal gland, pituitary, hypothalamus, and adrenal, and then ending with solar plexus.